Good morning, everybody. My name is Rainey Reitman. I am the Activism Director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and I have to say, I think this is going to be the best panel of the entire conference because we have an absolutely all-star group of panelists here for you today. I'm going to run through introductions relatively quick because I want to spend a lot more time talking about the issues than introducing the people who are going to be doing the talking. But I have, in no particular order, or rather in the order I wrote them down so I didn't mess it up, Katryna Dow. She's the founder and CEO of Meeco, which is a world-leading data independent startup in the data economy. Would you give a wave, please? There we go, thank you. I've got Shane Green, CEO and co-founder of TeamData, which was brought to you by Personal. TeamData is enterprise information security and collaboration company. Shane, give a little nod. There we go. I've got Robin Toombs, who's the CEO of Yoti, a digital identity system for confirming identity both online and face-to-face. Robin? There we go. And we've got Mark Weinstein. He's the founder and CEO of MeWe. I've known him for a number of years now. It's a revolutionary chat, social, and group app with no ads, no tracking, and no BS. And I wanted to thank you guys for coming here today. It is wonderful to be with you. Let's jump into it. I'd love for each of you to just take a moment to say hi, and then maybe if we could just help open this subject up, this personal data economy subject up, by giving an example, either a real example or a hypothetical example that you think indicates some of the biggest problems we're facing in the data economy world right now. Who wants to lead off? Boom, Mark.
Good morning. So I see a couple of issues with this personal data economy with, one world identity, things like that. A couple of weeks ago, there was a report that in Chechnya, they were actually seeking out and murdering homosexuals, gay people. And how do they find this out? How do they know who's gay? Well, in an open world, which, let's say Facebook proposes, and where there's an identity, where people are identified, this gets easy. Recently also Facebook was identified as really preying, their algorithm is preying on teenagers who are depressed and suicidal and then serving them with products. That's their only concern was, okay, you're suicidal, here's a product for you. You're depressed about your personal image, here's a product for you. So I'm very concerned about this whole idea of an open world, of one world identity, et cetera.
Katryna?
So I agree. We are going through this tectonic shift in society right now, and we have all these socio-political, financial. Everything is changing. Business models are changing. Technology is changing faster than we can keep up with regulation, and we're faced with a lot of ethical decisions right now about how we want society to function. And I think one of the things that's really exciting and important and also challenging about the work that we're doing across personal data is if you think of, mankind and our evolution, fire, wheel, steam, technology, knowledge, information, where we're at right now, we need to re-architect a lot of things in the way society functions. And one of the ways that we can start to do that is to push the processing and to push the authentication to the perimeter that is each of us as a node. And I'm sure over the course of this morning we'll talk about that. But I think if we start to think about that architecturally, we will be actually able to address some of these social issues as well.
I see Shane nodding. You agree with that? You have a response?
Is it on? Okay. I couldn't agree more. I think that I've felt since since I entered this space that data has become so important. It really is a fundamental human right that we as individuals have an ability to aggregate our data and reuse it how we wish, and that can include not allowing certain parties to see it, but it also includes, because we do live in a data-driven world that's very powerful and getting more powerful by the day, the ability to bring this really precious resource together and have it work for us. And I would say, as I look at this problem, and I don't think it's quite positioned this way enough, data is power. And so how is it being used for or against you? And, you know, in a world of targeted advertising, that may seem like your data is not really hurting you that badly. Hey, the product's free. But in a world of Siri or a personal digital assistant that's helping anticipate your every need and the like, it's mission critical. It, as they say, would like to know you better than yourself. So it matters that you understand what data they're using and how they're using it.
Robin, so I asked everybody on the panel to give a concrete, specific example, and I realized we immediately wandered away from that, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could talk about maybe a hypothetical example or a specific example of what brought this issue home for you, I think it's useful for the audience to kind of hear kind of more specifics.
Sure. So I think 2 examples for us. When we set out Yoti, we immediately recognized that the best solution for this was for the consumer should own and control their data. So 2 examples which are going live with us. One is that a under 18 can basically just share their under 18 attribute, not their date of birth, with a leading child charity which is working with Internet Watch Foundation to then basically have that picture, so a link to a picture, removed. And that anonymity, effectively apart from under 18, is fundamental to those people feeling confident to do that. If they had to give a lot of other data, it would be extremely unlikely that many of them would feel comfortable doing that because of the traceability. So that's one very clear example. A second one is when people go into the nightclub in the UK, you have to prove you're over 18. Some of the machinery effectively is looking at all of the information in the document, partly to check that it's valid, but they're then storing all of the address information, the driving license number, the expiry date, and you know, addresses are not a good thing for an 18-year-old to, walking into a nightclub, give to effectively a screen where a bouncer is then looking at that information. It's complete overkill, and it's not data minimization. It doesn't protect the consumer. All they need to do is prove that they're over 18, not exactly what is all of the other data.
Can we stay with UK and specifics? I mean, last week, you know, many people in the UK couldn't access their health records because the centralized system was under attack, and virtually nobody had a copy of all their health data, and surgeries were delayed, and all sorts of treatments were affected by that. So the idea, again, that we at the nodes didn't have a copy of our records was just insane, and in that case, actually really affected people's lives.
And following on, I think what's so powerful about what Robin is saying and Shane's backing up is that the new business models, the new value that can be realized is by putting the individual in the value chain at the right time. So access to the right information at the right time actually has commercial incentives for everybody, but also risk mitigation. And I think one of the things that's really important about this change when you start to talk about the tension between the commercial world as it is right now and individuals is there's actually benefits across the board. This is not an either or. This is really an and opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So you said something a minute ago that really perked my ears up, which was about data as a human right. And so I guess one of the questions I want to have is both, is data a human right? And if so, what about the right to not have data created or to delete data that's been created? Any thoughts on that?
I'd be happy to speak to that, because also I'm not sure I agree with Katryna here. Because I think the old system worked pretty well, where a doctor had your information and you had your information and that was it. I don't really understand or believe the need for this open world and for your data to be everywhere, and for the ISP now, which Congress just regulated, to be able to track and identify you when they sell your data. I think this is a bunch of BS. So I think the world actually works really well. I don't believe in one world identity, and I certainly don't believe, you know, in Mark Zuckerberg, who said privacy is a social norm of the past, which is also why I started MeWe. So there you have it.
Rainey, I think you know, there are some contradictions. So the regulator today feels very comfortable that a business in its terms and conditions say we need to keep your data for 6 years or 10 years or whatever it might be. And you know, that kind of makes sense, particularly if you need to keep the regulator happy. But you know, in the old days, that was a piece of paper locked up, hopefully in a fairly secure place, and it was hard to probably steal that data. That's not the paradigm now. So you know, I want to be able to delete certain data after it's served a purpose. I do need to share my data sometimes with my permission, but I should then be able to revoke. But what I can't do is, if I do a transaction with Katryna, both of us may be issued a receipt. I can delete my receipt, but I can't take away Katryna's right to hold her receipt to prove that the transaction was done with two willing participants. So I think the regulators got to begin to think, hang on, sometimes it's sensible for the data to be expunged.
Sorry, and picking up on your point in terms of, the choices right now, particularly for young people between the analog world that maybe we grew up in and the data-driven world, I think unless we can find a way to solve this so that people have agency, we're going to have, the norms are more and more, we had somebody join our team just recently who said his young son is never ever going to interact with his information in anything but a digital form, his education, his health records. So if we don't find a way for that to be mutual, I think I think we're on a track for sort of Faustian bargain. So we have to start thinking about how we redesign that. And I think the doctor example is a great one. Which doctor? Why shouldn't I have access to that information if I want to change doctors or move around and actually have the right information available at the right time to be part of a better health outcome? And I think so this is not about selling data, this is not about giving data away, this is about saying I'm empowered to use my data effectively in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up back on the idea of what a human right is. I mean, this is fundamental. It's about power and how power is used for or against us. And we have a concept called a social contract, and we give up certain rights and power to other bodies to help us as a community or as a society or as individuals. And I think what you see with data is a very feudal order where you get certain very centralized pockets of power that are aggregating data and using it how they see best. And, if you're defining it as your government or a certain type of company, you hope they're using it in the right way. But the bottom line is we've already worked this out over the last few hundred years without some rights ourselves and an ability to affect those outcomes. We will be abused and exploited even inadvertently. So there is no balance today. There is no data at the nodes where we as individuals can control it and have it work for us. Because I do agree, I'd like to be clear, I don't think you guys disagree as much as you might have stated. I think Katryna and myself are advocating for agency by the individual so that data serves our interests in the ways we want and at the times and places we want, not having it just out there in these centralized pools being used however a few people or parties decide.
That is the problem, and that's good. I thank you for saying that, because I want you guys to remember this phrase, 2 words, permanent record. Permanent record. Everything that you search today on your computer goes into your permanent record. Everything you post today on Facebook, everything you look at on Google, everything. If you've got an email helper like unroll.me, everything goes into your permanent record. The subjects, the issues, your health issues, your political opinions, your religious beliefs, everything is in your permanent record. Now, we live in democracy. Maybe we're somewhat okay, but we're not, obviously. But what about for the rest of the world that doesn't live in democratic institutions? What about that data? What about where they know everything about you and they can seek you out and harm you?
This is bringing up another issue that I wanted to kind of throw at you guys, which is, okay, we've built this internet system. We've got tech companies who are culling all this data. They're using it for all these various purposes. Where are they failing? And where do you want to see them doing a better job when it comes to data management? I see Katryna, and then we'll go to Robin.
Look, I think we're digital teenagers. When you think about, Facebook or Google, we're talking about tools and platforms that aren't even 2 decades old, right? So when you think about it from a time perspective and elapsed time perspective, we're at a point where if we were, a young person, our brains wouldn't even be completely formed, right? So I think the first thing is we're digital teenagers, right? We've experimented a lot. We've tried some things didn't work, some things did work. We kind of understand how the world works positively and negatively. And I think not to brush away any of the challenges because they're significant, But I think we're reaching this point of maturity where we see some of the opportunities now to start thinking about the architecture of the solution. This idea of we're all nodes on a network, we all have agency, we can all be part of the value that's created and exchanged. How do we turn our attention to saying, okay, part of the maturity cycle for any system is to look at, you know, what's that next frontier, and what are we collectively doing? And I think the great thing about the people here is we're trying to do something about that in very concrete ways.
You know, it's a fascinating issue that we all basically want to use, get utility out of a lot of the social networks and other websites, but there's a 50-page terms and conditions. So, you know, Shane's point about there's a social contract. I think there's also a kind of brand trust contract, and at the moment that clearly doesn't work because not one of us could, unless we're an expert in law, understand what those terms and conditions, what rights we're giving to those companies, and, you know, understanding that just it's not practical today. So really that needs to be a lot shorter. It needs to be companies thinking, if I was a consumer reading this, I would want to gain some comfort that you know, you are going to do the right things by me. So yesterday, one of the speakers about Bank of America was saying, you know, we have just, I think, 4 sentences, he said, in his privacy policy. That's pretty potent. You know, that's the kind of thing a consumer would like to read and think, okay, I get it. You clearly are thinking about me and trying to explain it to me. And, you know, there's a long way to go, I think, for some companies to think about, am I really doing what a consumer would want? Am I going to disclose how I'm going to use that data, and whether it's for their purpose as well as mine as a brand?
What I would say is that even the companies that seem to have the most data on us still have such an incredible small amount, such a thin slice. And so if you do believe in the power of data to help, you know, advance your interests, your needs, whether they be health or decision-making on travel, I mean, you can take any example, data can improve it. What we don't have today is any kind of architecture or tools that allow the user to decide how to bring this incredible amount of data together and reward those companies that they trust and that are going to do the right things with their data, which could be as simple as, we're going to use every piece of data you can give us for the next 90 seconds to help you make some really powerful decisions. Then we're not even going to store it, right? I mean, there's all kinds of models people are developing. They're just impossible to execute on today because the architecture the big parties are pushing assumes that the data is owned and controlled in these centralized locations rather than at the edges.
I just want to say that actually, Shane, I believe that there's a huge amount of data. Even back in 2014, 60 Minutes reported that data brokers have over 1,500 points of data on every one of you and us in this room. And the Wall Street Journal reported that Facebook was tracking us at over half of the most popular sites in America. This is 2014. So fast forward 3 years and imagine how much more data is in that cache.
That's right. Actually, no. Axiom publishes they have about 3,500 points of data for every person in the United States. What I would say is, in the course of a given day now, we're creating more data points than that. Right? Maybe in the next hour we will. So the amount of data is escalating, and my devices, everything's getting created without my knowledge or with my knowledge, but regardless, it's outside of my domain. And all I'm saying is the tools aren't there for us as users to even know about it, much less capture it and use it for our advantage. And what I see coming is a race to the top where these companies that want to do the right things actually want to embrace this new model where individuals have agency and where they're truly on our side trying to do the right things. And that is a very new model, but you can look at organic foods and other industries where those kinds of things have succeeded, these races to the top.
So you turn the conversation to things in the future, which I always think are some of the most interesting panel conversations. So one of the things we're seeing is the rise of more machine learning and how that is going to change the data trail created, because when you are interacting with a machine that is learning from you, it's starting to become a really different relationship. Can you guys talk to me about what concerns you have about this? Maybe we'll go down the line because I see Robin giving me big eyes.
I think I always think, what are the consumer principles again? If a machine is helping me do something, and it's been clarified to me what effectively help I'm getting from that clever processing power, then that's helpful. It may well help solve me a problem that otherwise I would really struggle to solve. But if it's basically working there in the background and I'm not really aware of what it's doing, or I've been told a little bit of what it's doing to help me, but actually it's helping the company a huge amount without me understanding that, and then that's being monetized, then probably I think that's not the contract that I want with the company. I want them to think about, how do you help me do things? Because then I'll trust your brand, and then I'll stay loyal to your brand, and you'll be helping me solve my problems, and you will monetize that, but either through me paying you or through me agreeing to how that contract is working. But I don't think that's the way it's working at the moment. So I don't think the machine is the problem. It's whether the person understands and agrees and permissions that they want to have that help.
Okay, you see the gap in consumer understanding. Who has a different gap they're seeing around AI? Okay, Katryna in there.
There's obviously an ethical design gap at the moment, and I think one of the challenges is a lot of the modeling's being modelled on big data, which is the fact that we could observe something and through an observation create inferences and then decision making based on those, and we know big data has been quite effective in that regard. The flip side of that is when you bring the individual and the transparency and you dial up the trust, you can get context and you can get intention, but you really need to have cooperation in that situation. So, and also the ethics need to be modeled on me, my norms in life. And so I think what we need to be doing is looking at the forefront of how we start to model AI that's based on the individual that interacts. Again, we need to move this to the periphery of the individual so that the inputs can be bidirectional. It's critical.
So if you think historically, machine learning would have been, in a gross way, would have been a restaurant seeing, let's say, how many desserts were ordered today, and then wanting to increase the percentage of desserts ordered and starting to experiment with different offerings. But you fast forward, that's really in the old world of metadata. But you fast forward to today, and machine learning is actually affecting my ability to critical think and your ability to critical think. Fake news, the fake news around the elections is a perfect example of that. So Facebook feeds the fake news really to people that they think are going to, based on the machine learning, are going to like the news. They don't really know that it's fake or not. They're just feeding and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing your perspective. And because almost 50% of Americans get their news from a site like Facebook, when you start to narrow through machine learning the information that you're getting, you limit and almost start to eliminate your ability to critical think in the historically sort of physically healthy way. So this becomes very dangerous.
I think what you're saying, though, Mark, is that, it's neutral, right? And today, meaning the technology itself of AI is neutral. It just happens to mostly be in the hands of companies who have certain business interests like the one you just described. And I think what Katryna is saying, and certainly what I believe, is that technology, we have to find the models and the tools to push it out to the individuals so that I also have, AI working for me. In fact, perhaps directly in opposition or negotiating with third-party AIs so that I can have the best outcome. And so that world, we've worked this out in the analog world, how to balance these types of rights, whether it's commercial or individual rights. They often get out of balance. We are out of balance right now. And again, as we sort of look, bringing it back to the personal data idea, if the fundamental input to any of this is data and we don't really have any, then you're sort of showing up to a knife fight without a weapon.
So I'm going to ask another question, and then after that, I want to maybe ask one more question, then go to audience questions. So start thinking of your questions, audience. And so one of the things that's come up at this conference a lot has been about the market versus the role of government. So to the extent that government have really had cornered the market on things like birth certificates and other identifiers, and the ways that some people are uncomfortable with certain governments having it versus how and when should the market be taking over, or is there even a way for the market to sort of jump into the identity space? I'd love to hear you guys weigh in on this one. Who wants to go first? You.
So I'm excited by this because I think lots of companies are going to be able to offer people the ability to take back ownership of their identity, and that's a really disruptively powerful thing. So if for free You can basically create your identity. You own your face. It may be used by other people, but effectively with biometrics and anti-spoofing, you own your face. You can then take a government document and you could put that into your identity. The government can't really stop you doing that. Obviously, they may not want you to have it checked against their databases, but actually people may well think, well, there's quite good confidence here. You've got a biometric, you've got your phone tied to your identity, you've now got a government set of attributes which match with a face to your face, and you're doing peer-to-peer to make it easier to make sure you don't get scammed on a classified site or whatever. The government doesn't need to be involved, just two adult counterparties getting some usefulness, and the government doesn't need to kind of know about it, track it, snoop or whatever. And I think, that hasn't been possible before now. It's going to be possible because you don't have to just sit here and show a passport to try and prove to Katryna that my name's Robin. You could do that with somebody in Australia right now with lots of kind of privacy and permission based, and it doesn't need to be the nation state.
So I'd like to distinguish between owning your data and owning your identity, because they're two very different things. Google owns your data, Facebook owns your data, Yahoo owns your data. Now your ISPs own your data, and they can sell it now associated with you. So, I think it's great that, I own my identity, but as you asked, is it possible for us to own our data? And when Facebook, and actually at colleges now, they actually go through their terms of service to show you the clause where Facebook says we co-own everything you post. And when you delete your account, by the way, nothing is deleted until the very last person who you've posted to also deletes their account, which is virtually never going to happen. So I think this is, as we look at, how can we get the ownership of our data back, I think that's going to be our biggest challenge and something we really have to look at.
So addressing that point directly, there's been two interesting governmental interventions in Europe related to this and related to Facebook specifically. The first were, two court cases that said a Facebook user had the right to get a copy of all the data that Facebook had stored about them back. And that was hotly contested, and they were successful at getting it back. And then the second is the upcoming GDPR regulations, which central to that says that companies do need now in a systematic way to provide copies of the data back to individuals. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that the companies need to delete that data, though there's certain provisions around that as well, and that's still being thought about and how to even execute the right to be forgotten in some cases. But that's complex. What I think is exciting about this, though, is as individuals start to get this really unique combination of data that or we as individuals have the ability to do, again, it's rather than creating a bigger stick, it's creating a bigger carrot. And I think the opportunity then to have earlier stage companies or perhaps even incumbents who really rethink their models say, I know I can change the game in terms of your experience with us, your outcome, if I have access to that kind of data or some part of that data. That's game changing, and that both of those come directly from, or that whole opportunity is being catalyzed in Europe from government actions, and not really broad, detailed sort of regulations, but really just this simple concept of if you have data on a customer, let them have a copy back.
I think the magic word Shane just said then is access, and I think one of the challenges for us is we're wrestling for for ownership, who owns the data, whereas control or access and consent actually is a pathway forward, because it's to say, first of all, I have the right to know what you've collected, when you collected it, and why you collected it. It's in my interest to understand what you want to do with that, and if there is some mutuality to that, to be part of an outcome. And I think one of the things that we need to collectively come up with is how do we help an engineer that's creating a new system that wants to use privacy by design principles, but may not have had the time to look at the ethical issues and all of the things that really are meaningful to us and we've spent time on. How do we lay out a blueprint that says, if you follow these steps, you can actually start to design something that has these empowering outcomes? And rather than arguing about who owns, how do you build in consent and transparency? What does access look like? And then once you've finished with the data, going back to your example, and you've provided that service, how do you then increase confidence by saying, okay, that data is disappeared now, we don't need it, but you're welcome to come back into that service, the next time, and we can create, hopefully, a great experience as a result of that. So I think that's the key thing right now is access and consent.
We've also got to regulate for, let's say, the right to be forgotten. You know, in Europe, there's also this initiative for a couple of years now called the right to be forgotten. But I think it's important, and I might surprise you here, that if you've broken the law and been convicted, I don't think that's public record, and I don't think you have a right to eliminate that from your record. I think that should be public. But the idea that I could actually eliminate and force Facebook to delete everything and force Google and everybody who's got a data packet in my permanent record to wipe that out, and then that I wouldn't be penalized for this if I'm looking for a job or something like that. We need to regulate for that. Because remember, as Ed Snowden says, you know, I mean, the right to privacy is a fundamental right of human beings. It's not about you doing something wrong. It's about your creativity. It's about being able to live in a world where you can freely express yourself without everything becoming a data point about everything that you do. This is critical.
Yeah, if I could just say, I completely agree with that last point, but I think that in this data-driven world, you're gonna see market-driven solutions that are building this kind of architecture, and we will, as I said earlier with the example, we may process thousands, even millions of points of data about you during a session. And at that moment, you know, they have just incredible insights to you as a person, but then it's gone. And I might choose to use that app or that service because that's how they've architected it, rather than the kinds of one-size-fits-all approach today where they get to keep all the data and use it however they want ad infinitum.
I think there's also a lot of things that people are going to find really useful by kind of changing the contract. So I would probably, like Shane, say it's really useful for me to give more information to a bank if it's going to allow them to be sure that it's me making a payment. Yeah, that could be biometrics, it could be a whole load of things, but I think that's in my interest to do that. And I will also hopefully trust that the bank's keeping only a minimal amount of information for the shortest time period to ensure that they are comfortable with that transaction is strongly verified. That's really useful to me, but to some other people, I just don't need to be trying to give them that kind of information. So I either can't use the service, or potentially there needs to be a better kind of enforcement that companies shouldn't be kind of burying all of this stuff in a 50-page contract, which you're never going to read.
And I think that banking example is a great one. You know, I travel a lot, and I have one of my banks that consistently cancels my cards as soon as I change countries. And I would really love them to know that it is me. And whilst they're cancelling the card for me, they're also letting through fraudulent transactions. So it's like I could actually make a difference in that, where that outcome would be mutually beneficial.
Mark?
Thank you for reminding me. I'm flying to China today. I got to call the credit card company before I get on the plane. Tim Berners-Lee is an advisor to MeWe. MeWe, you don't have machine learning. But Tim is completely opposed. He didn't invent the web for data. He invented the web for us to communicate. So what you'll hear a lot about Tim in the world and everything he's working on to bring back privacy, whatever we can do. I don't mind the idea of owning my identity with the bank. But don't think that biometrics can't be hacked. Everything can be hacked. Anybody can mimic. Anybody can crack this stuff. So that's the risk that we're dealing with. When you have identity and data in a packet that you own, is that hack-proof? Of course not. That's totally hackable. I don't know anything that's hack-proof.
Okay, I'm jumping in, guys. If you would, if you would line up here, if you have questions, I'm going to ask one more. I'm going to let Robin respond. But then once you respond, I also want you to say, every one of you guys here is amazingly a CEO at some sort of data economy company. I bet there's another whole bunch of people here. Maybe they'd like to be CEOs at their own data economy companies. What piece of advice would you give to them? So respond and
quick response to Mark. But I think it is actually quite expensive and difficult to do a lot of hacking of biometrics in an easy way where you wouldn't basically be giving any of your information
today,
to those
but
people.
not tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that. I think at the moment it's a knowledge-based thing. So a hacker can kind of basically, put the knowledge in, but not giving any kind of face or any other information. And as the bar is getting higher and higher, and actually it becomes more and more difficult to get away with it without having to basically run the risk of being caught. So they're quite commercial, people hackers. They don't really want to take a lot of risk of getting caught, and they don't want to spend a huge amount of time getting through too many layers of kind of authentication. So I think it might be a little bit more positive than that. In terms of advice to any kind of startups out there, I think it's been really clear as to what your purpose is. If you're doing a business-to-business service, absolutely make sure that you understand what it is that those businesses want you to do and deliver it effectively at a sensible price, and you'll do brilliantly well. If it's a consumer application, fundamentally understand what it is, your principles, and what you convey to the consumer, and commit to it and stick to it, because the consumer needs to trust that they're going on a journey with you. And if they don't really understand that you're kind of sure of what you're offering, you're going to get into problems.
So I would say, first of all, we're at the beginning of an amazing new market and change in society. So dive in, but have a very strong vision, be incredibly resilient, and be easy on the tic-tacs that you'll need to make along the way. So I think be really clear about where you are going, but understand that this whole space is forming, and have the agility to actually move. And then one other thing is create an ecosystem, look to peers. Shane has been an absolute hero to me and a trailblazer, and it's finding people that have really cleared some of those blocks and reaching out to them and creating strong, I think, alliances.
It's very simple. Always raise as much money as you can. Your revenues are going to always come later than you think. Make sure you have a revenue model. And if you really believe in what you're doing, don't stop when there's obviously every reason in the world to quit.
Yeah, absolutely. That. Thank you, Katryna, for what you said. I think one of the things that isn't happening enough right now is we're not actually participating in an ecosystem that is in existence. There are a lot of tools out there that you can use that allow you to start participating in privacy by design type apps that where you don't have to build everything from scratch. And at the conference, one of my observations has been just how little learning we've done from each other, because there's so many entry points to this market, whether you're coming at it from cybersecurity or identity or privacy or what have you. And so we have been a very disparate sort of bottoms up, ecosystem. And I think I'd be happy to talk to anyone about this, finding some real tools that let you accelerate so you don't have to build a privacy by design platform from scratch is also a pretty good idea.
Fantastic. We're going to have at least 2 questions, and our theme is brevity, because we are down to 4 minutes.
I like that last comment, because I'm LaVon. I'm a founder of a company in the personal data economy. Yes, let's compare notes. So my question is about terms of service, and one area that's intrigued me, and I wondered if any of you have comments on this, about building in the terms of how data is being used, how it's feeding into AI, if it is, along the way, rather than having that front end sign your terms of service and you don't know what's going to happen.
I think you want to be as straightforward and honest and clear in plain English as possible. And I'm going to make a suggestion. At MeWe, we have the only poison pill in the industry. So we actually say in our privacy policy that if we ever change it, we will tell you the changes and give you a link to delete your account if you don't like the changes. So, you want to build trust with, your customers and do everything you can to do that.
We have that too, by the way.
Same. Yeah, we do the same.
There are others that are doing that. But again, great example of my last point. We don't talk enough and have an understanding of the things where we have common ground. Yep.
So we can't track when you do a share. We issue receipts, but we can't track who it is. It might be a name going to a business, but we don't know that. You know it, and that counterparty knows it. But actually, we also say in our app, if you don't want us to even understand anonymously that you're a country code, so that we can try and understand, we need to service that country because there are users anonymously using it, then you can delete that as well. It's one button on our app, but you can say, actually, I don't even want to give you any help anonymously in how to improve your service. So we're incredibly brutal about let the consumer make the decisions. If we earn their trust, then we'll be okay. I'm sure a few people, as they do, are prepared to give us some anonymous information because we're offering them a useful service.
And we do the same, and very similar to personal, we have a legal set of terms and conditions that the individual can assert. We back them with our legal terms to say that when they're sharing information, they actually have specific rights in how that information is shared, revoked, the time, the duration, and that they have the ability to fall back on that as a service protection for them in the same way that an organization has it right now with its customers. So it's bi-directional.
Unless somebody's going to strongly disagree with something that somebody else said, I want to go to the last. Okay, great. Let's do the last question.
Okay. First of all, you're all doing the Lord's work. I really admire the goal that you're working towards, giving people control of their data. That applies to EFF as well. But as startups, you've got to keep the lights on. Mark, you briefly alluded to revenue models. Can you talk about what the revenue models are if you're not serving up ads, if you're not monetizing data, if you're not doing all these heinous things that Facebook's doing, then how are you going to make money?
I love that question because the restaurant example before, they don't have a camera in your refrigerator to know what to serve you. But when you get there, they've got to have the right product, the right service, the right ambiance. MeWe is the same thing. First of all, we just launched MeWe Pro. Pro is for enterprise customers. So that is a Slack competitor, and it is far superior to Slack, to Facebook Workplace, to Yammer. So I encourage you to check it out. And that's monthly recurring revenue per person. On MeWe Consumer, and these are two separate products, two separate websites, separate apps. On MeWe Consumer, it's very simple. We have a great full-featured service, custom cameras, disappearing content, encrypted chat. Now, our WhatsApp feature, our secret chat, is an optional feature, 99 cents a month, $5.99 a year. We have custom emojis, because people love custom emojis. In Japan, they sell in the hundreds of millions. So 99-cent packets of custom emojis. We have extra storage. We have a lot of features. We'll have custom apps coming for our members based on what the extra services that they want. So we do it the old-fashioned way. We serve our customers because our members are our customers. They're not data to sell.
Yeah, the freemium model does work with consumers, and I think you do have to generally give them a free product to be able to understand the value to themselves. We just know if they have to pay up front before they've been able to really try the goods, they're just not going to get over that hurdle. But I think once they feel the value proposition, they're more ready and willing to pay. And for different types of services, we also pivoted quite openly to TeamData away from the consumer personal product, because we started to find that the enterprise value of some of the tools that personal delivered to consumers was also quite valuable in the workplace. And I have to say, investors love that. They love to see the revenue. They love seeing that, when people are paying for something, they really let you know what they need to see in order to pay more and to keep using it. And that's been very successful for us too. And it doesn't preclude a consumer business, but I do think, and we actually have two brands and the like, it is kind of hard to do both at the same time, unless it's the identical product almost, which it sounds like yours is quite similar. But get them to pay, don't track and sell ads.
Amen.
So I think what we do is we basically say it's a consumer app, it's free for consumers. But actually what the consumer wants to do with our app is prove a verified name to a bank or to another company, an e-commerce site. And e-commerce sites and banks are actually quite comfortable paying a small fee for that verified information, particularly if it makes it very easy for the consumer. So if effectively the consumer is at one touch able to transfer some important attributes, it works for the consumer, it works for the bank, it works for me because the bank's prepared to pay me a small fee for doing it. So effectively the consumer gets what he wants, and he will pay partly because the bank has to cover those costs, but it's a pretty win-win situation. But it is important to understand what the business model is. You can't do everything for free for everyone.
And following from what Robin said, is we've been working with enterprises for the last year, particularly telecommunications, financial services and government, to map the cost at the moment of the friction and where customers or citizens, patients are actually disempowered. And there is an enormous amount of value to be mapped and shared across new value chains. So when you start to think about bringing the patient, the student, the citizen, the customer directly into a value chain, You manage cost, you manage compliance. As both Robin and Shane has said, you know, enterprises struggling with these escalating costs. They want more customer intimacy. They want to do more personalization. And guess what? The most effective way to do that is directly with the individual. And we, again, I think we're only just starting to see the new forms of value, which can be financial, loyalty, reward, access. There is a whole range of new ways also to reward individuals in that value.
Guys, please give a round of applause for this fantastic panel. Thank you so much. And then if you want to grab any of them for an additional conversation, we'll all be here for a couple of minutes at least. Thank you.
Thank you.